Hey guys, tonight, we're slipping into our sandals, brushing off the toga, and trudging up the gravel path toward a Roman dinner party that's already suspiciously loud. The sun hangs low over terracotta rooftops, casting long shadows on ivy-covered porticos. From inside the villa wafts the warm aroma of baked honey, something definitely fishy, and just a hint of regret. You lucky guest have been invited to one of Rome's infamous elite banquets, what they call a cena, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough to type, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the empire. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the grand entrance of the host's dormice, basically a private mansion where everything is expensive, overly polished, and smells slightly of incense and stress. You try not to trip on the mosaic floor, while a doorman side-eyes your slightly dusty tunic. It's early evening, and you're fashionably late, just as you were advised by that one smug merchant who thinks punctuality is for plebeians. The atrium stretches before you, ceiling open to the dusky sky, rainwater basin glinting in the center. You hear laughter and the distinct clang of silver against silver, muffled behind a velvet curtain. Somewhere, a lyre twangs out a painfully plucked melody. Welcome to the beginning of a very, very long meal. A house slave leads you through a corridor where marble busts of stern-faced ancestors silently judge you. You try not to make eye contact. At least one looks like he hasn't digested anything in 2,000 years. You reach the triclinium, the dining room lavishly decorated with murals of Bacchus and weirdly athletic cupids doing questionable things with grapes. Your host appears in a flurry of linen folds and garlic breath. He greets you with a toothy smile and air kisses that miss your cheek by several inches. His name is Lucius Cornelius, something or other, and he's very proud of his new couch covers. Imported from Syria, he boasts, although they definitely smell like wet goat. You nod politely, suppressing a sneeze. The other guests are already reclining around 3 couches, arranged in a U-shape of formation that says, intimate discussion, but quickly devolves into which elbow goes where. You awkwardly slide onto a couch, trying to emulate the graceful lean of a senator across from you. Instead, you manage something between a lounging lizard and a startled ferret. The couches are low built for leaning on the left elbow, which leaves your right hand free for eating. Yes, the Romans had a system. No, it's not easy. Your shoulder cramps almost immediately, and you're not sure where to rest your leg. It goes numb. You pretend this is fine. Servants dart around like caffeinated ghosts, carrying trays of things you can't pronounce and probably shouldn't identify. You're offered a scented hand towel, soaked in rose water, which somehow smells like your grandmother's armoire, and a tiny dish of olives. One falls off and rolls under the couch. You don't mention it. It's not worth it. Overhead, an oil lamp flickers. The air thickens with perfume, sweat, and anticipation. You overhear snippets of conversation. Someone's complaining about Gallic wine. Someone else is already bragging about their military service in Britannia. And one noblewoman is making slightly unhinged claims about being descended from Venus herself. Historians still argue whether some of these family lineages were clever inventions or just delusion, marinated in ambition. You take a moment to observe the art on the walls. One fresco depicts a banquet like this one, Only the guests are visibly enjoying themselves. Another shows a satyr vomiting into a vase, which feels like foreshadowing. A harpist enters the room with the enthusiasm of a cat being asked to swim. He strums a painfully slow tune, every note lingering just a beat too long, like that one dinner guest who won't stop talking about his new villa in Pompeii. You try not to visibly wince. Your host claps his hands and declares the gustaccio, the appetizer course, will begin shortly. Everyone cheers, with a bit too much energy possibly to drown out the harpist, who looks deeply offended. A slave offers you a goblet of wine. It's thin, watered down. Romans didn't drink their wine straight, because apparently even ancient people knew their limits. But there's a lot of it, and it will be flowing for hours. In the corner, a parrot squawks something that sounds like more garum. You hope it's trained. You hope it doesn't bite. You hope garum fermented fish sauce isn't what it sounds like. It is. Suddenly, a chill breeze drifts in from the garden, and with it the smell of roasting meat-baked bread and honey-glazed dates. Your stomach rumbles. Across the room, someone releases a discreet belch and fans themselves with a peacock feather. No one blinks. You realize this evening is going to test both your stomach and your social endurance. You adjust your toga again. Its riding up the wool is itchy, and your foot's asleep. Your host is now explaining that tonight's dinner has 12 courses. That's not counting the pre-dinner drinks, the mid-meal drinks, the post-dinner games, and the after-dinner drinks. You do some quick mental math and realize you'll still be here when the moon rises. Somewhere a servant sneezes. Everyone goes silent for half a beat, then resumes as if nothing happened. You wonder whether to say salve or just pretend you didn't hear. You pretend you didn't hear. It's safer. As your host describes the exotic ingredients flown in for tonight's meal, flamingo tongues, imported dates, pepper from India, you wonder just how far someone will go to impress their dinner guests. And you're just trying to make it through, without accidentally choking on a fig or insulting someone's lineage. Your head feels warm. The room buzzes with conversation. Outside, the sun dips behind the horizon. The oil lamps glow brighter. You are officially trapped in a first-century social event, with no exit except full stomach surrender. Welcome to the Roman elite's version of fun. You shift your weight and try again to lean like everyone else. The guy next to you, possibly named Gaius, or maybe Tertius, he mumbled it earlier over his cup, has clearly done this before. He's got that perfect left elbow, lean shoulder, rolled eyes, half-lidded like he was born to recline in tunics and judgment. You, on the other hand, are balancing between awkwardly lounging and about to fall off the couch backwards. The dining couches called lecti are made of wood and stuffed with something that crunches ominously when you move. Probably straw, possibly a small animal. They're low to the ground and designed with the express purpose of making you question every choice that led to this moment. You imagine ancient chiropractors making a fortune off this one pose. A servant stops to adjust your cushion. He doesn't ask, just nudges it like you're ornamental. You murmur thanks. He blinks once. Then he glides away silent as a judgmental breeze. These household slaves are trained to serve, without speaking unless spoken to. Historians still argue whether the eerie silence added to the elegance of these gatherings, or just made everything feel like dinner in a haunted museum. The wine comes around again. This time it's darker and slightly more fragrant, laced with a blend of herbs, meant to aid digestion and allegedly keep you lively. through the coming tidal wave of food. The Romans, oddly practical, rarely drank wine without diluting it. Straight wine was considered barbaric. You sip. It tastes like someone soaked a raisin in minty vinegar. You nod appreciatively, like you're not dying inside. Now reclined-ish, you glance around the room, pretending you're not slowly sinking into a cushioned trench. Other guests chatter. One older man complains loudly that reclining should be optional. A younger man counters that it builds character and core strength. You laugh softly. Then you realize he was serious. Your host begins introducing the seating order, which was carefully planned, according to status, friendship, political alliance, and apparently astrology. You weren't aware Jupiter in retrograde determined whether you got to sit near the good sauce tray. You've been placed somewhere in the upper middle tier, important enough to be inside, but not near enough to speak directly with Lucius, unless he initiates. He hasn't. Yet, suddenly, one of the guests gestures for a servant to adjust the lamp's wick. The flame dims. The room grows softer. A hush ripples across the triclinium. The harpist is back, and this time he's managed something vaguely resembling a tune, plucky hesitant, but pleasant in a drowsy kind of way. A woman in blue silk stretches her feet out toward a small bronze brazier, sighing loudly about the cold marble floors. She looks like she's halfway to fainting, but it's probably just fashionable languor. A moment of tension arises when two guests reach for the same napkin. It's not really a napkin. It's a fine linen strip called a mappa, placed delicately across your lap. You brought your own, like everyone does, to subtly signal wealth and taste. Yours is embroidered with a dolphin. You're very proud of it, until someone next to you unrolls a mappa, stitched with tiny gold thread, and what appears to be a very smug peacock. There's a flick of jealousy. Then you remember you're supposed to be relaxing. The air is rich with incense, frankincense, myrrh, something musky that clings to your tunic like social anxiety. The aroma mingles with the roasted smells, wafting from a distant kitchen, smoke, cumin pepper, and the unmistakable scent of overcooked lentils. You wonder who the chef is. Roman kitchens were usually staffed by enslaved cooks, trained in an odd mix of Greek culinary wisdom and dramatic improvisation. Cooking in a culina often smoky and cramped was more like battling a dragon with a ladle than modern meal prep. A tiny dog scuttles past. Possibly a gift. Possibly a guest. No one acknowledges it. It circles a couch leg and then vanishes under the table, trailing a scent of lavender and vague menace. Your host suddenly claps again. His tunic ripples. He stands not fully more of a half-rising lean and delivers a short speech about the glory of Roman civilization, the generosity of hospitality, and confusingly, the superiority of Etruscan plumbing. You nod along, unsure whether to laugh or nod more vigorously. Everyone does both. A man near you whispers that in ancient times, guests reclined on the right side of the host, if they were favored. You're on the left. It's fine. You didn't expect to be the favorite. Just the guy who doesn't accidentally knock over the sauce boat. There's always a sauce boat. You glance toward the doorway, where a curtain twitches. More food is coming. You brace. Your stomach issues a small, warning gurgle. It is not ready. Your neighbor leans closer, voice low. They say last week he served peacock tongues. Real ones. 27 of them. You blink. He nods gravely. Tasted like regret. There's a thud as something ceramic crashes in the kitchen. Nobody reacts. You imagine the cook sweating bullets, knowing full well that burning the flamingo course is a good way to be reassigned to latrine duty. Or worse, performing poetry at the next banquet. A server with an elaborate silver tray approaches. You reach for a fig, but they pass right by, still waiting for the official start. You stare longingly at the fruit. It stares back. Eventually, another server arrives with a basin. It's for washing hands, a pre-meal ritual, involving scented water and gentle pours over your fingers. The water is cool, almost icy, and it drips from your palms into a silver bowl, like the start of some long ceremonial journey, or like the last calm breath before a tidal wave of unfamiliar hors d'oeuvres. In this moment, you realize something profound. You are about to spend the next several hours lying on your side, being fed until you reach a near mystical state of fullness, surrounded by strangers who take sponge cake politics very seriously. And yet, it's oddly peaceful. A little weird, yes, but peaceful. The lighting is gentle, the cushions are finally cooperating, and your body is beginning to accept its sideways fate. You take another sip of the wine and allow the harpist's tune to float over you like a slightly out-of-tune lullaby. Outside, the stars begin to pierce through the twilight sky. Inside, dinner hasn't even officially started, and already you're one course closer to Roman culinary immortality, or an indigestion that could end empires. The harp fades out, leaving a curious silence like the dining room is holding its breath. And then it begins. A row of servants glides in each one, balancing trays piled with strange aromatic tidbits. The gustaccio, or appetizer course, has officially arrived, and your first offering is a perfectly halved boiled egg, dusted with herbs and black pepper. You watch as a fellow guest taps his egg politely on the edge of a small dish, as though it's a fragile piece of art, and not just, well, an egg. You follow suit, peeling yours with as much grace as possible. The yolk is creamy, almost golden. You taste. It's actually decent. Then comes the olives. Of course, there are olives. Green, black, wrinkled, slick. Some still clinging to tiny twigs, like they just rolled in from the grove. You pop one into your mouth, only to discover it's been soaked in wine and garlic. It tastes like a culinary dare, but you nod like it's divine. Your host leans forward. "These are from Hispania," he declares, gesturing grandly toward the olive dish, harvested under a full moon. Someone claps. You're not sure if it's out of appreciation or sarcasm, but no one questions it. Romans had a flair for poetic detail, even if it was completely made up on the spot. And then, just when you think you've got a handle on this ancient amuse-bouche situation, they bring out garum, a tiny bowl filled with a translucent brownish liquid that smells like someone forgot a fish in the sun, and then added vinegar for flair. It's the pride of Roman condiments, a fermented fish sauce made from gut salt and thyme. Lots and lots of thyme. Historians still argue whether garum was genuinely beloved or just a badge of social endurance. You dip a bit of bread into it anyway. The flavor hits like a salty slap to the soul. You smile through it. Everyone's watching. Another tray passes by this one, bearing a pale, squishy lump that quivers ever so slightly. That sea urchin says your couch neighbor with alarming cheer. You decline. He eats yours. You try not to gag. Next comes a surprisingly dainty little croquette, made of lentils, coriander, and just enough honey to confuse your taste buds. A fringe historical tidbit. Some Roman recipes called for brains. Yes, literal animal brains, as a creamy filling for such bites. You choose not to ask. The guests murmur their approval, though you catch one older woman discreetly wiping her tongue with her napkin. Too much lovage, she whispers to no one in particular. She says this like it's a crime. Maybe it is. A young man across the room is loudly claiming he once had an appetizer made of stewed ostrich gizzards wrapped in fig leaves. Someone else counters with eel tartare, served on silver spoons in Alexandria. It's an appetizer flex-off, and you are deeply out of your depth. Then the eggs again. This time scrambled, whisked with herbs layered with shredded cheese, and cooked in what must be an amphora full of olive oil. You take a bite. It's fluffy. It's buttery. It's got something chewy in it that might be pine nuts, or if the gods are feeling cheeky, tiny slivers of pickled radish. As you eat, your host tells a story about the Emperor Claudius, who reportedly once vomited into his own toga, just to keep eating during a banquet. Everyone laughs politely. You are unsure whether to be amused or alarmed. You overhear a nearby guest mutter, "At least it's not peacock beaks again." You pretend not to have heard. There's only so much weird poultry talk your modern brain can handle. Another dish arrives, chickpea fritters fried in sesame oil, served with a drizzle of date syrup. You try it. It's crispy, earthy sweet, a Roman precursor to that one trendy street food you pretended to like last summer. Not bad. You reach for another. The host gestures again this time, summoning a boy carrying a tray of what looks like tiny birds on skewers. Quails, he explains, with a garum honey glaze. You blink. The quails blink back. You take one if only to blend in. It's tender, if overly enthusiastic about salt. In the corner, the parrot screeches again. Vivet Lucius. It squawks a phrase someone definitely taught it on purpose. Lucius beams. You consider asking the bird if it can recite anything about Caesar's last words. The appetizers continue: more olives, more eggs. You're sensing a theme, and a little plate of pickled vegetables that have been sitting in vinegar so long, they probably have opinions about politics. You nibble on a carrot that bites back. Your neighbor now talks about how Romans believed certain foods, prepared the body for digestion appetizers, were meant to open the stomach. You nod solemnly, as if you too have studied ancient intestinal theories. Secretly, your stomach is wide awake and starting to file protest paperwork. The dining room grows warmer as the lamps burn low and the chatter rises like slow thunder. A woman lounges on the far couch, now barefoot, sipping wine with one hand and tossing crumbs to the little dog circling the room. No one tells her off. You're not sure anyone even notices. Everyone's too caught up in conversation wine or the increasing weirdness of the snack selection. By the end of the gustaccio, you've sampled no fewer than 14 different things. You're not full, but you're not hungry either. You're in that delicate state of suspicious anticipation, the kind where your brain says you've made it, but your host says, and now, the real courses begin. Someone sneezes again. This time, you do say salve, and your neighbor gives you a nod of quiet approval. The harpist returns with a new melody slightly better, but still with the enthusiasm of a man who regrets every life choice. He plays on as the servers collect empty trays and begin setting out fresh cloths and small bowls of something pungent. You glance down at your tunic. There's a bit of olive oil near the hem. You dab it with your mappa and try to act nonchalant. Meanwhile, across the room, Lucius is already describing the next course in far too much detail. Something about stuffed dormice. You take a breath. Here we go. The wine returns, of course. Always the wine. This time, it's in a larger jug. Taller, darker, sweating slightly in the lamplight, like it knows what's about to happen. A slave deftly pours it into your cup from high above, somehow not spilling a drop. It splashes gently into your goblet, diluted just as before. But now there's something else in the aroma: cinnamon, myrrh, possibly oregano. The Romans loved spicing their wine with all manner of herbs, flowers, and spices, presumably because drinking the same grape juice every night for decades would bore even Bacchus himself. You sip cautiously. It's surprisingly smooth and far less vinegary than earlier. You wonder if this is the good stuff, saved for mid-meal morale boosts. You can almost feel your body relaxing into the cushions as the warmth spreads through your chest, like an overly enthusiastic toga hug. Around the room, voices rise. The wine is loosening tongues and lowering eyebrows. One guest is already recounting a wildly suspicious story about wrestling a Germanic chieftain while drunk on goat's milk. Another is attempting to quote Horace, but keeps forgetting the endings. Nobody corrects him. You think he might be important. Your neighbor leans toward you again now, much more talkative. You know he says, sloshing his cup slightly. Pliny the Elder wrote that drinking wine at night was good for digestion, but only if it was mixed with seawater. He pauses dramatically, then whispers, "This might be seawater." You stare at your cup. You keep drinking anyway. The host stands, or tries to. He's reclined too long, and rises with a faint groan, one hand on the back of a guest's couch for balance. Let the second course begin. He bellows unnecessarily loud for such a small room. The harpist flinches. A few people cheer. The parrot mutters something unintelligible. This is when the wine truly begins to flow. Servants appear with fresh pitchers, some taller than your torso. They refill cups with mechanical grace, never making eye contact, never spilling. You're starting to suspect they were trained by the gods of balance and patience. The cup of the guy next to you never dips below half full. You test this by sipping quickly. Within seconds, it's topped off again. You narrow your eyes. He winks. They know who tips, he whispers. A woman across the room has produced a fan and is waving it theatrically while laughing. Her cheeks are flushed. Someone nearby is trying to sing something about Jupiter and cabbages, and he's only slightly off-key. A pair of men are now locked in an intense debate over whether Egyptian or Gallic wine causes more aggressive hangovers. Historians still argue what Roman hangovers were actually like, but judging by tonight, you assume they involved regret and at least one badly timed bath. Your stomach rumbles. The garum is staging a quiet protest in your gut, joined by the olives and that suspiciously rubbery egg. You shift on your couch, trying to find a new position that doesn't compress your increasingly opinionated organs. Reclining it turns out is not ideal for digestion. Suddenly, someone starts clapping rhythmically. You join in because why not? This seems like the kind of party where unexpected applause is encouraged. A man with a lopsided laurel wreath stands up and makes a toast. To the gods, everyone echoes. To the Republic, fewer people echo. A few cough. To Lucius's taste in sauces, a raucous cheer. Lucius smiles like a man who has strong opinions about anchovy-based condiments and has spent his entire fortune proving them. A servant interrupts the revelry with a long wooden ladle. He dips it into an amphora and pours more wine into your cup this time from a greater height. A bit splashes on your toga. No one notices. Or rather, they pretend not to. You're starting to understand that part of surviving a Roman banquet is pretending everything is completely normal, even when a guy next to you starts reciting poetry to a roast chicken. Now the real drinking games begin. One guest demands a round of symposium trivia, basically yelling out questions about the Iliad, while trying not to spill anything. You get one right by accident. Everyone claps. You bow awkwardly. Your couch creaks ominously. The room is tilting a little. You're almost certain it's not just your brain. Your host begins telling a story about how wine was a divine gift from Bacchus, and how once during a storm, he drank so much he tried to marry a statue of Venus. Everyone laughs. Someone shouts. What happened next? Lucius shrugs. She never called me back. Your goblet is refilled again. This time the wine is cooler, laced with something citrusy. You've stopped trying to identify ingredients. Your taste buds are numb. You nod, smile, and sip, just as a fresh tray of what appears to be candied pine cones passes by. Someone drops a cup. It shatters dramatically. A servant appears instantly with a cloth and a replacement cup. The drinker doesn't even stop talking. It's like he's done this before. You make a mental note, shatter a cup. Receive more wine. Tempting. You catch a new scent in the air. Spiced dates, maybe with cinnamon. Possibly honey. You inhale slowly. It's comforting familiar. The wine has softened your edges. You lean a bit more into your cushion. A breeze rustles the curtains. The harpist hits a surprisingly lovely chord. A guest next to you begins reciting bad love poetry, to no one in particular. Her eyes, he slurs, are like olives, soft, but bitter. You try not to snort wine through your nose. You fail. In the corner, someone's asleep. Not passed out, just reclined into gentle snoring. No one wakes him. That's the unspoken rule here. If you nap, you nap. If you drool, someone discreetly dabs your face with a linen cloth and moves on. It's all very elegant. By the time your cup is filled for the umpteenth time, the room feels different, warmer, looser, like everyone's slowly becoming versions of themselves they normally keep hidden, goofy sentimental, just a little slouched. Even the uptight senator type is now tapping his cup along to the harp's rhythm, completely unaware that his laurel wreath has slid down over one eye. The wine has done its job. It's lubricated conversation, sanded the rough edges off awkward silences, and blurred the line between reality and the absurd. You're not quite sure how long you've been sipping, but it no longer matters. Time here is measured in refills and punchlines, and just as you begin to float gently into the fuzzy middle of the evening, someone announces the next course. The dormice have arrived. And here they come, those long, whispered little legends of Romans snacking the dormice. A polished silver tray appears as if conjured, held by a servant, with the poise of a priest delivering sacred relics. The tray is arranged with precision, each dormouse small roasted, curled into itself like a sleeping baby shoe, is resting in a nest of fresh herbs and honey glaze. Their tiny feet are tucked in, as if they're still dreaming. You try not to think about that too hard. Someone at the next couch over gasps with excitement. Lucius found ones with the perfect fat-to-crunch ratio, they whisper, like it's a state secret. From Etruria, only the best. Your host grins proudly, lifting one between 2 fingers and declaring stuffed with pork pepper and pine nuts, and a little honey, for balance. He pops it into his mouth and closes his eyes like a man enjoying a massage from the gods. You glance down at yours. It's warm, slightly crispy, and adorable in a mildly horrifying way. You hesitate. First time your neighbor asks, eyebrow raised. You nod, then try to look brave. You take a bite. The outer skin crunches lightly. Inside, the stuffing is rich, fatty, and heavily spiced at overpowering almost, but weirdly pleasant. Not quite meat, not quite pastry, just dormouse. You nod in solemn approval, even as your brain whispers, "You just ate a rodent, my dude." As you chew, conversation flows freely. A guest across the room starts theorizing that perhaps these dormice are symbolic. You see, he says, gesturing with his skewer, they embody the fragility of empire tender, yet heavily seasoned. No one disagrees. Someone applauds. Another guest raises their dormouse in a toast. The next tray is even more daring. Small songbirds, quails, and thrushes presented whole beaks and all. You begin to suspect your dinner might eventually look back at you. A woman in a stunning emerald dress coos over hers like it's a toy, then eats it in 2 bites. You're halfway between horrified and impressed. "Have you tried the flamingo tongues?" A voice slurs nearby. You turn slowly, hoping that was a joke. It was not. Another tray approaches, and yes, flamingo tongues. Not whole tongues, mind you, but slivers pink and delicate, arranged in a circle like some sort of morbid floral arrangement. They smell faintly of vinegar and orange peel. Historians still argue whether flamingo tongues were genuinely served often, or were just a bizarre flex by the wealthiest. Tonight, though, it seems Lucius is determined to push the historical record to its limits. You pick one up with trembling fingers. It's chewy. Very chewy. Tastes like chicken if chicken had dreams of becoming citrus. You chase it down with more wine. At this point, the wine is less beverage and more coping mechanism. More trays arrive. Smoked oysters still warm. Fried brains of lamb, possibly goat, maybe both. Lucius doesn't specify. You pass on those. Others dig in with enthusiasm. One man claims it improves memory. Another counters that it makes him forget what he's eaten. The irony is not lost, next to pie. A savory one bursting with leeks nuts, and surprise more dormice. This time minced and mixed with mushrooms. You eat it because honestly, resistance feels futile now. You suspect the couch has absorbed you, and is now feeding you out of obligation. And oh, the sauces. Each dish is accompanied by tiny bowls, some spicy, some sour, some sweet and cloying. The Romans loved sauces almost more than the food itself. Garum, of course, makes multiple appearances each time in a slightly different form. One is whipped. One is reduced to a glaze. One is suspiciously chunky. A man nearby begins ranking them aloud, like he's judging a wine tasting. This one sings, he says, pointing at a mustard-heavy blend. That one screams, he adds, gesturing towards something purplish with far too much garlic. You agree, silently. A platter of boiled eggs and fish sauce is next. Yes, more eggs. This is not a drill. You accept your fate, stab one with your knife, and scoop it onto a crust of bread. Halfway through chewing, a servant refills your cup. Again. You can't tell if the wine is helping or making everything blurrier. Either way, you nod in thanks and try to discreetly wipe the dormouse grease off your hands. Your host, emboldened by the chorus of burps and belly pats, launches into another story. This one about a senator who once served larks, baked inside of pigeons, inside of ducks, inside of a peacock. A 4-bird roast, he exclaims. With date-stuffed olives in each layer, he waits for the applause. It comes though mostly from guests too full to argue. Somewhere in the room, someone drops a fork. You didn't even realize anyone was using forks. Technically, Romans mostly used their hands or spoons, cochlearia, with little pronged utensils used only occasionally for serving. Your neighbor looks scandalized. Clearly not raised properly, he mutters into his fig wine. The parrot starts singing now. Badly. Garum garum it caws. A few guests join in. You're not sure if you're hallucinating, or if this is just what the 4th century does to a man. The heat of the room begins to press in. Lamps glow like halos around everyone's heads, and the scent of roasted herbs and sweat now clings to the silk drapes. A child, possibly Lucius's nephew, is running in slow circles around the triclinium, chased by a tiny dog wearing a gold collar. No one stops them. This is just how parties go now. Then a surprise course jellied snails, served in their shells with tiny skewers. You try one. It's oddly lemony and gelatinous. Your stomach sends a polite complaint, which you ignore. The guest beside you taps your arm. Want to see something horrifying, he asks. Before you can decline, he holds up a spoonful of what looks like a soft-boiled egg, but isn't. Sea sponge custard, he explains, with honey and vinegar. You try not to cry. You try it. It's not terrible. It is, however, confusing. By the time the trays slow down, you've consumed no fewer than 9 different animals, some intentionally. Your fingers are sticky. Your tunic has mysterious stains. You may have just licked fish sauce off your own sleeve. You don't care anymore. The laughter grows louder. A couple nearby is now trying to out-recline each other in an unspoken horizontal contest. You adjust your position to seem both casual and deeply philosophical. The couch beneath you sighs audibly. The meal presses forward, each bite stranger than the last, each flavor a new test of your will and your gag reflex. And yet, you find yourself smiling, because somehow, against all odds, this ridiculous, excessive Roman dinner is starting to feel like a weird kind of home. Just in time for the next course. You are not ready for this. You thought you had reached your threshold, that you'd sampled the strangest things the Roman palate could possibly concoct. But now, as the servers glide in with trays that glisten under lamplight like alien artifacts, you realize that was only the prelude. This course is jelly, not your modern fruity scooped-on-toast kind of jelly. No. This is Roman aspic gelatina, if you want to sound sophisticated. A shimmering mosaic of meats and vegetables, suspended in globs of translucent mystery. It jiggles ominously as it's set before you. You blink, it blinks back. The first one is a molded dome of boiled chicken, hard-boiled eggs, and herbs, encased in a golden wobbly glaze. You give it a gentle prod with your knife. It shivers all the way to its center, as though aware it's being watched. Your neighbor picks up his spoon with enthusiasm. Ah, yes, he says. The jelly course. Soothing for the stomach, they say. You glance at the glistening cube of gelatin wobbling atop your plate and question everything. But then again, the Romans were pioneers of food texture. They didn't just care how things tasted. They wanted surprise artistry, sometimes even a little alarm. Historians still debate whether this obsession with aspic was about preserving food, showing off wealth, or simply creating something to watch dance while you ate. You suspect it was all three. You scoop a bite. The aspic slides onto your tongue with an unsettling slurp. It tastes herby, cold, slightly meaty, like if soup got tired and gave up halfway through. It's not bad, but you wouldn't exactly ask for it. The next tray brings a more ambitious design, a layered aspic loaf fish at the bottom, veal in the middle, and eggs on top stacked like an ancient 3-tier cake. The colors are vibrant, almost celebratory, as though someone baked a piñata out of leftovers. You don't know whether to eat it or offer it as a gift to the gods. Still, you brave a bite. It is complex, texturally ambitious. Your mouth is confused but polite. You nod solemnly at no one. A nearby guest is enthusiastically explaining that the key to a good aspic is pigskin. You boil it for hours, she says, until it releases the gelatin. Then strain it, add your bits, cool it, and voila. She lifts a slice like it's a jewel. It slips off the spoon and splats back onto her plate with a squelch that silences 3 conversations. Someone claps. No one knows why. Another dish arrives, tongue yes tongue, sliced thin, curled like ribbons floating in a spiced carrot aspic. You try not to picture the original owner of the tongue. You fail. You eat it anyway. The jelly is surprisingly sweet, the meat tender. Somewhere a part of you dies. Another part takes notes. A man across the room slurs. This reminds me of my mother's cooking. Then he begins crying quietly into his wine. No one addresses it. Now the wild cards begin. A bowl of jellied garum. Yes, the fish sauce. Yes, jellied. It's thick, dark, quivering. It smells like ancient sadness. You pass on it. Others don't. Then aspic with chickpeas. Aspic with pickled onions. Aspic with tiny shrimp. Aspic with dates and pine nuts. The Romans have turned your every nightmare into gelatin, but they didn't stop at meat. Oh no, a sweet version appears. Fruit slices suspended in honeyed jelly, figs, pomegranate seeds, orange peel all arranged like a stained glass window trapped in amber. It's the dessert version of something that should never have existed, and yet it's refreshing, cold, sweet, tangy. The jiggling seems almost charming now. You're not sure if this is Stockholm Syndrome or actual appreciation, but either way, you ask for a second spoonful. The room, meanwhile, is humming. Guests are swaying more than reclining. The wine is now flowing from multiple sources. One amphora has been refilled 3 times. A man in the corner is speaking passionately to a fig. You think the fig might be winning the argument. The harpist has stopped pretending to care. He strums occasionally more out of habit than purpose, like a man playing his last song on a slowly sinking ship. You notice something odd. The couch you're on has become more comfortable. Or perhaps you've just lost all feeling in your lower half. Either way, you slide a little deeper into your cushion and let the wine and jelly lull you into a sort of culinary hypnosis. Another aspic comes out this one, with tiny edible flowers pressed into the sides. It's almost beautiful, like a snow globe you could eat. You try it. It's a burst of rosewater and pepper. Your palate is having an existential crisis. You look around and realize everyone has adapted. No one blinks at the jelly anymore. It is simply part of the experience. Like the wine, like the endless creeping fullness that's beginning to press against your ribs. Someone yawns audibly. Another guest replies with a toast. To the resilience of the Roman stomach, they say. Cups clink. A spoon falls to the floor. The dog sniffs it, decides against it. Your host, Lucius, rises again. "Ah, the jelly course," he says dreamily. "A celebration of texture, flavor, and suspense." He grins. "Let's take a moment to thank the swine whose knees brought us here." People cheer. You clap softly. It's the least you can do for the knees. As the last of the aspic is cleared away, your tongue breathes a sigh of relief. There will be no more jelly. For now, you sip your wine and glance at the parrot, who is now muttering something about slippery chickens. You don't question it. You no longer question anything, and just when you think you've reached the edge of culinary comprehension, someone leans over and whispers the next course in your ear. Fish, they say, as though sharing a secret. Lots and lots of fish. It starts with the scent, briny, smoky, and slightly suspicious. You glance toward the kitchen archway, just as the servants re-emerge this time, with longer trays and more solemn expressions. That's how you know things are getting serious. When even the guys holding eels look grim, you brace yourself. The fish course has arrived. Now, to be clear, when Romans say a fish course, they don't mean one. They mean an aquatic procession that could cause a minor panic at a fish market. A full marine parade, scaled, grilled, pickled, sauced, and smoked, waddling its way across the dining room, like Poseidon threw a tantrum. First, the mullet. Fat, pinkish eyes bulging like it saw the bill for this dinner. It's served whole, lightly seasoned with herbs, and still very much shaped like itself. You prod it gently. Its skin flakes off, revealing tender white flesh. You try a bite. It's buttery with a little too much salt and a whisper of bay leaf. Not bad, honestly. One of the better things you've eaten that still had a face. A guest across from you announces that mullet are best caught during the new moon, when they're least deceitful. You nod, hoping this isn't a metaphor. He continues, "And you mustn't eat the liver unless it was a Tuesday." Again, unclear if metaphor. Next, eels. They're curled in tight spirals, glazed with a thick honey vinegar sauce that looks suspiciously like someone spilled a bottle of molasses. Eels were considered a delicacy in Rome, and Lucius, of course, has gone all out. These are not ordinary eels. These are elite eels, possibly named and raised on a diet of luxury. You poke one, it jiggles. Your neighbor, already 2 cups ahead of you in wine, happily bites into his. "Delicious," he says, spraying a few sauce droplets in your direction. You know Augustus supposedly banned the sale of certain eels because they were too closely associated with luxury decadence. He grins. "I call that a glowing endorsement." You try a bite. It's rich, almost meaty. You feel the texture shift between chew and slither. It tastes like fish trying to be pork. You don't hate it, but you definitely don't trust it. Then comes the sea bream, grilled and served on a plank of cedarwood. It's simple, elegant, and mercifully deboned. You breathe a sigh of relief. This fish does not stare into your soul. It merely feeds it. You enjoy it quietly, savoring the crispy skin and the citrus glaze pulled beneath it. A brief moment of harmony in an otherwise slippery descent. Another guest loudly asks if anyone wants to trade their anchovies for his scallops. Several people recoil. Anchovies are polarizing even in ancient Rome. Some consider them prized, especially when cured with wine must and herbs. Others, like you, wonder if they're just an elaborate prank the Mediterranean played on the world. Regardless, you try one. It's salty, intensely salty. Your mouth puckers involuntarily, and your left eye might be watering. You chase it with wine, then another gulp for safety. Meanwhile, the centerpiece is rolled in a giant silver platter, bearing a whole sea bass mouth-agape fins, fanned out dramatically, like it's auditioning for an opera. It's stuffed with coriander mint pine nuts, and what you suspect is about 3 different wines. The skin has been seared and glazed, giving it the sheen of a particularly fancy shoe. Lucius stands and dramatically carves into it with a golden knife. The room watches in reverent silence as he lifts a perfect slice and places it on your plate. "A gift from the Bay of Naples," he says proudly. You take a bite. It melts. Soft, flaky, a symphony of sea and spice. Finally, something your tongue doesn't have to decode, like an ancient riddle. Of course it can't last. Soon after the pickled fish arrive, sardines soaked in vinegar and cloves, trout marinated in fig wine, mackerel dried and rubbed with cumin. Your plate is now a confusing map of oceanic experimentation. Each bite brings a new challenge. Some are tangy and curious. Others taste like they were aged in someone's sandal. Historians still argue whether the variety in Roman fish dishes was driven by culinary ambition, or simply the need to hide the fact that not all of it was fresh. Given how far some fish had to travel, days overland in sealed jars, you suspect it was a little of both. You reach for a piece of bread to steady yourself, only to find it's infused with anchovy paste. You chew slowly, blinking at the betrayal. Suddenly, someone belches loudly and raises their cup. To Neptune they shout, and to fish who die with purpose. Everyone laughs. You laugh. The fish on your plate does not. The conversation takes a strange turn. A guest beside you begins arguing that fish should be judged not just by taste, but by their dreams. I want to know, he says, whether this trout had ambition. You quietly scoot your dish an inch further from him. At the edge of the room, the dog, still trailing its gold collar, is attempting to eat a smoked eel someone abandoned on a napkin. A servant swiftly intercepts, sweeping the creature up into a towel, like a guilty pastry. The parrot squawks its approval. Then comes the sea urchin roe, served raw, spooned directly onto your plate in small golden dollops. It's briny, creamy, and has the mouthfeel of something that should come with a warning. The man next to you calls it the caviar of empire, then immediately gags into his napkin. You nod in understanding. Not agreement, but understanding. And still more fish. Botarga salted fish eggs shaved over warm barley. Shellfish stew with cumin. Fried perch on skewers with cinnamon and honey glaze. A jellyfish salad that no one touches, not even the parrot. By now your stomach is a bubbling tide pool of oil salt and regret. Your left hand is trembling slightly from the sheer repetition of reaching, biting, nodding, chewing. You begin to question the timeline of your life. How did you get here? Why are you sweating? Did that anchovy just blink? Lucius claps again, visibly flushed with wine and triumph. And now, he declares a break before the meats. There's a chorus of gasps. Some guests lean back like marathon runners hitting their wall. Others cheer like gladiators. You glance down at your plate scales bones and sauces in a chaotic swirl, and feel the edges of your consciousness softening. You're full, but also hollow, like your soul just did backstroke through a seafood buffet. The wine arrives again like an old friend who may have bad ideas. You sip, you recline, you prepare. The fish course is done. But your journey, far from over. For a moment, just a moment, the dining room stills. Not completely silent, of course. There's the gentle gurgle of wine, being poured a muffled hiccup from someone over by the harpist, and the soft snores of the man who's been asleep since the eel course. But there's a pause, a lull, a collective sigh that says we made it through the sea. Now let us breathe. You recline a little further back on your couch, wondering whether you're digesting or simply surrendering to gravity. The wine feels warmer now, heavier too, curling in your chest like a sleepy cat. Your limbs ache slightly, not from exertion, but from having done absolutely nothing in the most elaborate way possible. And now, as the servants sweep away fish bones and jelly crumbs, something curious happens. The talking quiets. And in the sweet post-fish haze, philosophy slips in. A wiry man, in a threadbare but clearly expensive tunic, lifts a finger, as if raising a curtain on Act 2. We must ask ourselves, he begins with no preamble, whether a man who is always full ever truly hungers. The guests pause wine mid-air. One nods sagely. Another burps. Your neighbor whispers he's a stoic, or maybe he's just constipated. Hard to tell at this point. The philosophical man continues. Epicurus tells us that the absence of pain is the greatest pleasure, but I submit what of longing, what of desire unmet. He takes a deliberate sip of wine, staring meaningfully into the middle distance. No one's quite sure whether to clap or blink. Then with perfect comedic timing, someone drops a fig. It plops on the floor with a squish that's far too loud in the moment. The spell breaks. Laughter bubbles up from every couch. Not polite laughter, real, messy, wine-wobbled laughter. You let out a small chuckle yourself, covering your mouth as though decorum matters anymore. The parrot cackles too, possibly on purpose. Lucius, clearly enjoying the chaos, raises his cup. To full bellies and empty philosophy, he cries. To full bellies, everyone echoes. A man 2 couches down gestures dramatically with a date in hand. Let us speak only in riddles. Now he declares, then promptly forgets what he was about to say. The harpist, perhaps sensing that his moment has arrived, changes key. He plays a few experimental notes, then bursts into something resembling a cheerful jig. A few heads bob in time. Someone taps the rim of a wine cup rhythmically with their spoon, then misses and smacks their own hand. No one minds. Your head begins to swim, slightly lulled by the repetition of clinking goblets and the low hum of conversation. It's a kind of group hypnosis, where everyone drifts in and out of lucidity, like buoys on a wine-dark sea. One woman begins reciting lines from Ovid in a sing-song voice. Another tries to join in, and gets every word wrong. They high-five anyway. A man leans over and completely deadpan says, "I once had a dream that I was a garum amphora." You don't know how to respond. You just pat his shoulder. He nods in thanks. This is the interlude. Not a break exactly, more like a suspension of reality. A dream-like pocket between courses where the meal becomes less about food and more about drifting conversation, unexpected confessions and questionable metaphors. Someone is now balancing a plum on their forehead. You pretend not to notice. You think they're winning. Lucius invites a guest to tell a story. He obliges with gusto. It was during the Saturnalia feast. The guest begins gesturing grandly, and we'd all gotten into an argument over who invented boiled cabbage. Naturally, it turned violent here. A few guests nod, as though this is to be expected. And I ended up married to a woman from Cyprus. Temporarily, For religious reasons. The room erupts in cheers. Someone demands a reenactment. He politely declines. Historians still argue whether these intercourse entertainments were scheduled or spontaneous. But one thing is certain: the Romans loved spectacle. And here, in this twilight moment, between fish and fowl, the spectacle is your fellow guests, drunk, rambling, half-reclining philosophers and poets and war veterans, all crammed together under the flickering light of oil lamps. You let your gaze drift upward past the velvet curtain, past the open ceiling that lets in the cool Roman night. Stars are out now, pinpricks of quiet in an otherwise overstimulated world. You wonder if Jupiter himself is up there watching this party and shaking his head. The quiet doesn't last long. A small man in a stained yellow tunic suddenly leaps up and performs what can only be described as a dramatic impersonation of a carrot being harvested. There's crawling, there's groaning. Someone claps, someone else spills wine. Lucius loves it. He's doubled over with laughter, tears in his eyes, declaring it a performance worthy of the forum. You find yourself laughing too. Not because it's particularly clever, just because everyone else is. A guest across the room begins debating whether the soul is made of air or fire. Someone else insists it's composed of steam and willpower. You stay out of it. Your soul currently feels like it's made of jelly and breadcrumbs. There's another toast, this one, to the gods of digestion, then another to well-behaved poultry. The toasts begin to pile up, some absurd. You raise your cup each time, feeling the warmth of wine of the couch of company that's both ridiculous and weirdly comforting. And as the harpist picks out a lazy lullaby of a tune, things slow again. Heads lean against pillows. A few guests are clearly asleep. One man snores so rhythmically, you start to wonder if he's doing it on purpose. The dog, now full from stolen fig and eel scraps, has curled into a corner, snoring in time. You close your eyes for just a moment, just long enough to let the hum of voices and harp and crackling oil lamps lull you deeper. And just when you think you might drift into a food and wine-induced slumber, a trumpet blares. Not a real one, just a servant clearing his throat in a rather trumpet-like way. He announces, "Carne imminent." The meat is imminent. A cheer rises. A moan follows. Someone says, "Dear gods," under their breath. You take one last sip of wine and brace yourself. It's about to get very, very meaty in here. And yet, as the first meat platter arrives, carried with reverence by 3 servants, and accompanied by what you think is a flute solo, you realize there is no real way to prepare for a Roman meat course. It's not just a bit of pork or a few choice cuts. No. This is an entire symphony of sizzling, spiced, dripping protein, arranged in a sequence designed to overwhelm both your senses and your moral compass. Center stage is a boar, a whole one, roasted to a glossy mahogany sheen, its mouth stuffed with apples and its tusks wrapped in gold foil. It lies there like a sacrificed beast of legend legs, tucked belly-plump smoke still curling from its flanks. A garland of herbs surrounds it like it's being honored at its own funeral, which, in a way, it is. Lucius rises tipsy but triumphant and declares, "This noble beast was hunted in the hills of Etruria just 4 days ago." You doubt that very much. The boar looks like it died of exhaustion, just watching this banquet come together. A servant steps forward and carves it with theatrical flair. Thick slices are served to each guest, laid atop little trenches of sauce. and garnished with what appears to be roasted pears. You dig in. It's divine. Tender, smoky, rich with rosemary and garlic. The fat melts like butter. You chew, slowly savoring it, not because you're polite, but because your stomach is sending signals like, "We have reached capacity, sir, please reconsider." You ignore them. Next comes lamb. Delicate chops with burnt edges and mint sauce. Then rabbit braised with prunes and mustard seeds. Someone says this was a favorite of Marcus Aurelius. Someone else says Marcus was a vegetarian. Historians still argue. You chew, and let the contradiction wash over you with the meat juices. Sausages arrive next. Not simple ones. These are intricately spiced, coiled into spirals, and served in mini bronze skillets that are frankly hotter than the food. You burn your fingers. Twice. Worth it. Your neighbor passes you a platter with slices of roast duck, each one lacquered in honey and black pepper. You take a piece and immediately burn your mouth. You make a small sound that might be mmm or might be ow. Either way, your neighbor nods approvingly. Then it happens. Someone lifts a covered dish with a flourish, and a new odor hits the room, savory, peppery, and just a little wrong. Is that brain, someone asks. It is. Specifically, calf brain served cold, sliced, and garnished with dill and lemon zest. You consider your options. You choose the smallest piece and put it delicately on your bread. You chew. It's smooth. Almost too smooth. Like the food equivalent of a blank stare, your neighbor whispers. Some say it improves intellect. You glance at his empty plate. He's had 4 servings. You reserve judgment. Next comes a pile of small birds. Game hens. Sparrows, possibly something you've never seen in daylight, all deep-fried and arranged in a pyramid that suggests someone was paid far too much for presentation. You're handed one with tiny tongs. It's crispy, greasy, glorious. You eat the whole thing except for the beak, which is apparently optional. The man across from you is trying to balance a chicken thigh on his nose. No one stops him. A new sauce appears dark, thick, almost chocolatey, made from wine dates, vinegar, and spices. You dip a bite of venison into it. You have no idea what's happening in your mouth, but your taste buds seem both confused and aroused. Another round of wine. This one is stronger, much stronger. The kind that makes you laugh at things that aren't jokes. You sip and find yourself giggling as someone retells a very dramatic story about a goose stealing their toga. You're unsure if it's real. It feels real. You reach for another slice of roast beef only to realize it's not beef. It's goat. Very young goat, apparently fed only on figs, and dreams someone jokes. It's tender, rich, with a slightly sweet finish that lingers like a weird memory. Lucius now stands again, his 5th time doing so, and he's a bit wobbly. Now he says, "Behold, globi porcinae." Everyone ooze. You have no idea what that is, but the silver tray that follows makes it clear. They are meatballs. Yes, meatballs. But these ones are deep-fried and coated in honey and crushed almonds. You blink. You eat one, then another, then 2 more while no one's looking. You're no longer eating because you're hungry. You're eating because it's become a kind of sport, a competition between your pride and your gastrointestinal limits. Now the meat pies, stuffed with chicken pork and tiny bits of sausage in a flaky crust that is far too buttery to exist in a world before refrigeration. One guest actually moans. Not romantically, just like emotionally. Another uses his mappa to fan his face while chewing. Someone taps you on the shoulder and offers you just a taste of smoked lark wrapped in bacon. You nod without making eye contact. You eat it. It's like swallowing the entire countryside at once. Then comes a curious pause. One guest has stopped eating and is now drawing diagrams in the oil on their plate. I'm mapping the meal, they say. Fish was northeast. Boar is west. I think the aspic was temporal. No one challenges them. A platter of veal ribs goes by. You wave it off. A dish of glazed pork knuckles arrives. You pretend to be asleep. Someone tries to hand you a quail drumstick. You smile politely and hide behind your wine. Even the parrot is slumped on its perch, now eyes half-lidded, muttering something that might be no more meat. You stare down at your plate, which has become a battlefield of bones, crumbs, and sauces that are beginning to congeal. You've lost count of how many animals you've eaten. It feels impressive, alarming, a little spiritual. Lucius beams, arms outstretched, like a man who has achieved total meaty domination. This, he says proudly, is what separates us from the barbarians. Your neighbor mutters, "I think I've become the boar." You pat your stomach. It does not respond. It has entered survival mode. Then the music changes. The harpist, now visibly tipsy, plucks out a merry little tune. The rhythm picks up. Voices rise. Cups are refilled again. And just like that, the room shifts. You've reached the meat plateau. From here it's only downhill, into sauces, sweets, and according to rumor, someone's swallowing a pearl. Your hands are sticky. Not from one thing, mind you, but a mosaic of sauces, drips, glazes, and oils. You look down at your fingers, which now glisten in a way that suggests either divine anointing or complete loss of cutlery etiquette. Possibly both. You reach for the linen mappa on your lap, but it's already sacrificed itself to a smear of honeyed boar fat and a rogue smear of plum sauce. And the sauces. Oh, the sauces. They've arrived in what can only be described as a convoy. Tiny bowls arranged like military formations on slender wooden trays. Each guest is presented with a collection, and each bowl, though small, carries the weight of its creator's ambition. One is vivid yellow, another deep rust red, and another disturbingly purple, like someone pured a robe. You're told the purple one is a blend of mulberries, vinegar, and goat marrow. You decide to start with the yellow. It's tangy, bright, almost citrusy, which makes no sense because lemons aren't common here yet. You squint. Mustard, maybe saffron, a hint of crushed lovage, that Roman favorite that smells like celery and ambition. You dip a tiny piece of bread into it. It sings on your tongue. The next sauce is heavy on garum, so much so that it punches your taste buds in the kidneys. You cough. Your neighbor laughs. That one's called the wake-up call, he says. You believe him. Another sauce is almost creamy. A blend of fig paste and wine with pine nuts, crushed so finely they've turned to velvet. You could eat it with a spoon. You don't. You're not that far gone. Yet, Lucius, meanwhile, is circling the room, trailing a servant who holds a tray of just sauces. Each dish has a destiny he intones, and each sauce is its soulmate. He points dramatically at a roast pigeon and says, "That one only sings with myrtle." You don't question him. A heated argument breaks out between two guests about whether pork should ever be paired with cinnamon. One insists it's tradition. The other says it's treason. Both are very drunk and gesturing with greasy forks like philosophers wielding daggers. Historians still argue whether Romans actually had such intense sauce pairings, or if this is just Lucius being Lucius. Someone nearby is spooning sauce directly onto their tongue. No bread, no meat, just sauce. You respect the commitment. Then someone says the phrase that chills you to your core. Sweet sauces are coming, and oh, they do. The first is a glossy reduction of honey vinegar, and crushed dates thick enough to coat a spoon, and slow enough to make you watch it drip. It's paired with roast duck and suspiciously orange-colored apples. You try it. It's like biting into a dessert with identity issues. Next comes de-fruitum boiled wine syrup. Sticky dark, poured over what appears to be grilled figs. It tastes like raisins that went to college and studied metaphysics. Another sauce has rose petals in it. Crushed, steeped, strained, and swirled into goat cheese. It's floral, creamy, possibly romantic. You dip a chunk of sausage in it before realizing it was meant for dessert. No one corrects you, or themselves. You try a few more cumin and honey, pepper and mint, sesame with fish sauce. They blend into one another, your brain slowly losing the ability to separate flavor from memory. You begin to hallucinate sauces you haven't even tasted. A sauce with coriander and regret. A dipping paste made from pickled memory. You reach for a cup of wine, but it's not wine. It's pasca, a Roman drink made of vinegar water and herbs. It stings your lips. You nod thoughtfully, as if this was intentional. You miss wine. At the edge of the room, someone is lecturing a disinterested dog about how sauces represent the fleeting nature of political alliances. Always changing, always messy. The dog sneezes. Lucius announces a sauce challenge. This is not an official thing, but no one stops him. 2 guests are blindfolded and handed bites of meat dipped in various concoctions. They must guess the ingredients. They fail spectacularly. To the mystery of sauces Lucius toasts. To sauces the guests cry. To taste buds we may never get back. You mutter under your breath, but still raise your cup. You look down at your plate. It's now a swirling battlefield of smears, crumbs, and small puddles. You've stopped trying to keep things separate. You combine sauces just to see what happens. Honey, garum, fig. Not bad. Pepper, vinegar, dill. Aggressively confusing. Mustard, rose, pine, nut. You may have unlocked the culinary equivalent of time travel. Suddenly, a server appears with a clean towel and offers to wipe your hands. You blink. Is this mercy you accept? Your fingers, now freed from their sticky armor, feel light, vulnerable, ready for more chaos. The harpist has switched to a playful, wandering melody. Someone is humming along. Another guest is attempting to balance a spoon of sauce on their elbow while reciting Virgil. They fail. Magnificently. The wine is stronger now. Or maybe you are weaker. Either way, everything tastes slightly warmer, softer. Even the sauce debates have mellowed into gentle comparisons. This one reminds me of my second wife, someone says dreamily. Sweet, surprising, and a little vinegary. Someone asks if sauce is a metaphor for love. Someone else answers, no, it's a metaphor for debt. No one really knows what they're talking about anymore, but it doesn't matter. You're full. You're sticky. You're deeply, confusingly content. The sauce course, absurd, overwhelming, strangely tender, has wrapped you in its chaotic embrace and whispered you survived. And just when you start wondering how many more courses your mortal body can handle, someone clinks a spoon against their cup and announces, "It's time for the pastries." You close your eyes. Here we go again. There is a moment fleeting delicate between the sauce course and the arrival of dessert, where everyone collectively considers faking their own death. Your stomach is full. Your limbs are heavy. Your brain is floating somewhere between "I regret everything" and "I can still do this." You have tasted garum 5 different ways. You have met the boar and survived. And now, a trumpet, a real one this time, squeaks from the side of the room and announces pastries. Lucius claps his hands like a child promised candied nuts. "Bring in the towers," he calls. And you do not like the sound of that. What enters is not a tray, but a sculpture. A towering, multi-tiered arrangement of golden, syrup-slicked pastries, stacked like a pyramid that could survive a siege. At the base, deep-fried dough balls called globuli soaked in honey and sprinkled with poppy seeds. Above that, little crescent-shaped cookies filled with dates and pine nuts. At the top, a roasted pear wrapped in pastry and decorated with silver leaf. No one touches it. It's clearly sacred. A server offers you a globulus. It is warm, sticky. You bite into it and feel honey ooze down your chin and quite possibly into your soul. You are instantly and completely covered in sugar. It is impossible to eat this discreetly, and everyone has stopped trying. Your neighbor moans. "I would fight a lion for another one of these," he says, licking his fingers. A small lion, he clarifies. The next dish is a kind of cake libum made of cheese flour and egg baked and drenched in honey. It's dense, moist, slightly sour, the kind of cake that could double as a building material and still taste like a dream. You eat slowly, reverently, your teeth sticking together with every chew. Historians still debate whether these cakes were everyday fare or saved for festivals. Judging by the reverence in Lucius's eyes as he devours his, you suspect this is his version of a holy day. Now come the tarts, flaky crusts, filled with fig jam mashed dates and pomegranate seeds. Some are flavored with pepper, others with wine, and one particularly bold version tastes like it was made from someone's experimental poetry. You take a bite. You cough. You recover. You try a different one. Much better. A servant passes by with a tray of almond brittle cracking under its own weight. Another follows with sesame biscuits, stacked in spirals like edible jewelry. You nibble cautiously. Everything is crunchy, sticky, or both. You are starting to believe you might actually die of sweetness. Then comes the candied fruit. Figs, of course. Always figs. Poached in wine, rolled in honey, and served with a tiny sprig of mint. For that I'm still classy vibe. You take one. You immediately regret it. It is syrup and fruit. Form a sugar bomb, wrapped in a sugar robe, dipped in sugar, and then casually introduced to more sugar. You chase it with wine. You're not even tasting things anymore. You're just riding waves of flavor like a ship lost at Caramel Sea. A loud cheer erupts as someone bites into a nut-stuffed pastry and finds a pearl. Yes, an actual pearl, hidden inside like a prize in a sea of glucose. Lucius roars with laughter. The lucky one, he calls out. A sign from Venus herself. The guest who found it blinks, holds it up triumphantly, and immediately chokes on a walnut. A servant pats his back gently while others clap. Traditional, someone says, as though near death by pastry is part of the plan. And then goat cheese custard, soft white, and delicately baked in small cups. It tastes like cheesecake that learned how to sing. Sweet, slightly tangy, topped with a drizzle of thick date syrup and a single toasted pine nut placed just so. It is elegance in edible form. You eat 3. Your fingers are now so sticky, you could probably climb a wall using only your hands. The mappa has surrendered entirely. You wipe your fingers on your toga and tell yourself its historical authenticity. Someone sneezes powdered sugar. Another guest has fallen asleep on a tray of almond cookies. No one moves him. He looks peaceful. Lucius, still upright, barely raises his goblet and bellows. To Roman ingenuity, to the baker's art, to sugar from Hispania, and flour from Gaul. His face is flushed. His toga has stains that may tell a story future archaeologists will spend decades interpreting. There's a second pyramid of pastries being brought in now. This one's smaller, but equally terrifying. It includes dulcia domestica dates, stuffed with nuts and coated in honey. You're pretty sure you've already had them. You eat them again anyway. They are now your personality. A woman near the parrot begins reciting a poem about figs. It's oddly moving. The parrot chimes in with what sounds like too sweet. No one knows who taught it that. Possibly Lucius, your stomach, which has not said a word since the meat course, suddenly pipes up with a warning rumble. You ignore it. You are now in too deep. The pastry pyramid must be respected. Then comes a tray of must cakes, spiced wine-flavored little biscuits that crumble at the edges and stick to your teeth like delicious regrets. You chew slowly. The world slows with you. At this point, the wine is sweet, syrupy, more dessert than drink. Your cup is filled with something dark, red, and thick. It clings to the rim and tastes like aged plums soaked in ambition. You sip. You sigh. You may never be hungry again. You lean back, gaze drifting toward the lamplight flickering on the ceiling. You feel warmth. You feel sugar. You feel ancestral. Like you've done this before in another life. Like your soul was once a pastry, drowned in honey at the feet of Jupiter. The harpist strums a soft chord. Someone nearby is weeping gently into their cake. Another guest is whispering to their dessert, as though it's listening. You understand. You close your eyes for a moment. You breathe in roasted almonds and poached pear. Your teeth are coated in sweetness. Your fingers will never be clean again. And just when you think it's finally over, Lucius claps. The entertainment he slurs has arrived. You open one eye. Oh no. If your stomach had a voice, it would be sobbing. But before it can draft a formal complaint, the harpist abruptly changes tempo, and with a fanfare of plucked strings, the entertainment bursts through the curtain, like someone yelled, "Unleash the chaos." First, it's a fire eater. Shirtless, barefoot eyes wide with theatrical madness, he dances through the center of the triclinium, waving 2 blazing torches and belching clouds of flame that almost singe a guest's laurel wreath. A servant casually moves a wine jug out of danger, as though this is completely normal, which you realize with dawning horror. It probably is. You flinch as the fire eater breathes a particularly aggressive plume a little too close to the sauce table. No one panics. A few guests cheer half-heartedly. The man who's been face down in almond cookies stirs, but does not rise. "Is this safe?" you whisper to your neighbor. He shrugs. "Not really." Then without warning, a poet steps forward, toga perfectly arranged, holding a small scroll, and looking extremely pleased with himself. The crowd groans. Apparently, he's a regular. Tonight, he announces in the sonorous tone of someone who once lost a shoe in the Tiber, but made it sound like an epic. I recite my new work ode to a spilled fig. You glance around. No one looks thrilled. He begins. It is thus long. It is also aggressively metaphorical. There are entire stanzas about juice as the essence of destiny. The fig represents time-death, and also Lucius's first marriage. You sip your wine, and wonder if the fig ever had a chance to say no. Halfway through, the parrot interrupts with a piercing squawk. Booing, it screeches. Someone claps. The poet tries to carry on, clearly wounded. Historians still argue whether these poetic interludes were sincere cultural showcases or subtle ways to encourage digestion breaks. Judging by the number of guests, now gently reclining with their eyes closed, you're guessing the latter. A servant passes by with what appears to be a small basket of pickled nuts and plays the role of snack sommelier. You politely decline. You're still busy processing the fig as death metaphor. Then the goose appears, not as food, as entertainment. A man in bright blue silk pants, bare-chested, oiled, and very serious walks in, with a live goose tucked under his arm. The goose looks annoyed. The man bows, sets the goose down, and promptly begins to wrestle it. You blink. So does the goose. Then with dramatic flair, the man lunges. The goose flaps. There is hissing. Feathers fly. The man somersaults away with unnecessary flourish. The crowd roars with laughter. Lucius pounds the table in delight. You are no longer sure what reality is. Your neighbor, sipping wine with great dignity, leans over and whispers, "Last week, it was a pig, dressed as Jupiter. The goose is better." The wrestler now attempts to balance the goose on his back while standing on one foot. He fails. The goose takes this as an opportunity to peck his calf. More cheering. The parrot screeches. Attack. Someone throws a raisin. The goose eats it. The man bows again, now bleeding slightly but beaming, and exits with the goose tucked calmly under his arm, like a sleepy child. You applaud out of sheer bewildered politeness. Next, a small group of flautists enter, playing an overly complicated tune that sounds like someone trying to whistle while running uphill. It's oddly soothing in contrast to the previous chaos. A guest nearby begins humming along with remarkable accuracy, only to fall asleep mid-hum. He slides off his couch like a melting pudding and lands in a graceful heap. No one helps. This is standard procedure by now. Then comes a magician, or so he claims. He introduces himself as Marcus the Marvelous and begins pulling eggs out of a goblet, then grapes from his sleeves, then somehow a small frog from his sandal. You clap nervously. He smiles a little too long. You sip your wine a little too fast. "Behold," he announces, "the coin behind your ear." There is, in fact, a coin behind your ear. You flinch. He bows. "Thank you. I accept tips in honey cakes or applause." You give him both. It feels safer that way. The harpist returns, playing a soft ballad now. The melody drapes over the guests, like a gentle blanket. The noise dies down. The poet is sulking near the curtains. The goose is gone. The magician is juggling raisins with mixed success. And for a while, there's peace. Lucius cheeks pink with pride, and wine sits back and surveys his empire of exhausted guests and empty plates. He looks like a man who has tamed the night and turned it into a 7-hour tribute to overindulgence. Someone starts humming the harp's melody. Someone else begins massaging their own stomach, like they're coaxing a truce from within. You recline further. Your head nestles into a soft pillow. The lamps glow gently now, their flames flickering low and slow like tiny dancers. The smell of roasted honey still hangs in the air, mingled with the sharper notes of spilled wine and crushed herbs. A hush falls over the room, not silence, but something close. The kind of hush that suggests a spell has been cast. That time has briefly agreed to stop moving forward. That dessert entertainment and philosophy have all taken their final bow and exited the stage. Lucius clears his throat. He raises a hand unsteady but noble. One last toast, he says softly, almost reverently. To what we have eaten, to what we have shared, and to what we'll pretend we don't remember tomorrow. Glasses rise. To forgetting someone cries. You raise your cup. It's nearly empty. That's fine. You drink. And just like that, the harp plays its last note. You close your eyes. The goose didn't win, but neither did you. The harp has faded into memory. The poet is gone, possibly crying into a cookie somewhere. And the goose, no one knows. No one asks. It's better that way. But the wine, the wine has not finished with you. As the final notes of entertainment dissolve into the lamplit haze, a new wave of amphory emerges like backup dancers in the third act of a musical no one remembers auditioning for. This wine is darker, richer, heavier. It's late-night wine, the kind that stops asking for your permission. Lucius, now very much marinated in his own hospitality, lifts his goblet and slurs. The best is yet to flow. He stumbles slightly and is caught by a particularly agile servant who seems to have done this before. Cups are refilled. Not with the thin herbal blends from earlier, but with thick, sweet stuff. Wine steeped in dried fruits, toasted spices, maybe a dash of regret. You sip and immediately understand why it was saved for now. It tastes like candied dreams and deeply questionable decisions. The talking shifts. Gone are the high-minded debates and literary name-dropping. Now the topics are looser. I once kissed a statue, one guest confesses. I married one, says another. People laugh, too loudly. Someone snorts. Your neighbor leans close, eyes glassy. Do you think oysters have opinions, he asks. You don't answer. You're too focused on your cup, which keeps refilling itself through some dark Roman magic. The guest who earlier tried to balance a plum on their forehead is now attempting the same feat with a honeyed fig. It falls. They cheer anyway. At some point, someone produces a lyre. Not the harpist, a new figure clearly emboldened by wine and sleep deprivation. He strums 3 out-of-tune chords, then begins a song about a woman who fell in love with her neighbor's goat. You think it's a metaphor. You hope it's a metaphor. More singing breaks out. Not coordinated. Not even in the same key. Just a cacophony of half-remembered tavern songs, childhood lullabies, and what might be a dirge for the boar you all devoured hours ago. Someone harmonizes with the parrot. Someone else howls. Lucius, eyes gleaming, joins in with a chant about Venus and vinegar. You can't make out the lyrics. You don't want to. Someone tries to start a conga line. It lasts 3 steps. You find yourself grinning. Not because anything makes sense, but because your brain has finally surrendered. It's stopped resisting. You've transcended logic and entered the pure, sloshing absurdity of the Roman late-night moment. A guest is now dancing in place on their couch. Not on it, in it. The cushions have collapsed, and they're sunk so far into the fabric that it looks like a soft pit trap. They keep dancing anyway, arms in the air, wine sloshing wildly. You glance down at your toga. It is a tapestry of stains, now garum, honey, possibly eel. You wear it like a badge of honor. Someone proposes a toast to unruly fruit. Everyone drinks. Then to missing sandals. Someone lifts a bare foot. A cheer erupts. The room is melting. Furniture blurs. Shadows flicker across frescoes that seem to lean in with amusement. One of the painted cupids appears to be side-eyeing the wine tray. You blink. It doesn't stop. You're not drunk exactly. You're timeless, floating, tethered to a couch that feels like a raft on a syrupy ocean of plum wine and goose feathers. A man nearby has fallen asleep with his hand in a bowl of roasted almonds. A woman next to him is gently braiding his hair with sprigs of rosemary. It's beautiful. It's bizarre. Historians still argue whether these late-night revelries were structured or just organic chaos. You suspect there's a Roman word for this specific kind of post-dessert delirium. If not, there should be. And just when it seems the room can't possibly descend any further into this grape-soaked fever dream, someone yells, "Philosophy fight." Two guests begin arguing over whether the soul is round or triangular. You tune them out. Your soul is somewhere under the couch sleeping. A servant walks past with yet another amphora. You raise your goblet not because you want more, but because everyone else is doing it, and you're too tired to be the only one with restraint. You sip. Your mouth tastes like the inside of a fig's diary. You smile. Everything is wine. Everything is fine. Time has no meaning anymore. You are reclined, partly sunken into a pillow that may have fused to your shoulder, with a belly that no longer accepts feedback, a toga that now resembles an archaeological dig site, and a goblet so familiar it may legally count as a roommate. Around you, the party has not ended. It has simply shifted. The energy is lower now, not because anyone's tired, though most are, but because everyone has reached that special Roman plateau where digestion and delirium meet. You watch as conversations spiral into half-coherent theories, debates over emperors' hairstyles and declarations of love to inanimate objects. Caesar's hair was absolutely real. One guest insists jabbing a honey-dipped fig for emphasis. His hair was symbolic counters another, like a laurel crown of denial. You don't even pretend to care. You just sip. The wine at this hour is warmer. Not in temperature, though that too, but in flavor. Deep, fig-heavy, like the bottom of a barrel that tells secrets. Lucius has long since stopped making speeches. He sprawled sideways across two couches, grinning at nothing in particular. A grape hangs from his ear. Across the room, someone is loudly whispering about Roman plumbing innovations. Another is trying to stack walnut shells into a tower. The harpist has either left or evaporated. The parrot mutters more sauce and is promptly ignored. You shift your weight slightly and find your own legs again. Barely. Your foot is numb. Your knee is somewhere. You try to sit upright and immediately regret it. Back to reclining it is. A woman nearby, face flushed and tunic slightly askew, turns to you and murmurs, "Do you think we've been here for days?" You shrug. It's entirely possible. Your neighbor offers you a fig, then drops it. It rolls into a dark corner, where the tiny dog from earlier now sits licking the floor. You both pretend not to see it. More philosophy, someone suggests. Voice hoarse. Yes, comes a reply. But lying down, that seems to be the consensus. No one rises anymore. guests deliver their arguments horizontally, gesturing from their elbows like limp senators. One insists that dreams are simply fermented memories. Another claims that the moon is jealous of Rome. No one disagrees exactly. They just trail off into silence. You try to follow the conversation, but everything comes in waves. The gentle hum of crickets from outside, the rhythmic clink of half-empty goblets, the soft conspiratorial murmuring of two guests whispering about someone's embarrassing gladiator phase, and in between, it all sighs. Not sad ones, but long, satisfied exhales, like air being slowly released from an amphora that's done its job. Someone begins humming again. A song you don't recognize, but that feels strangely ancient. A melody older than the couch beneath you, older than the olives, older than the empire itself. One guest has removed their belt and is using it as a headband. Another is reclining so deeply, they're almost on the floor, eyes open but entirely elsewhere. A stray breeze slips through the open ceiling. You feel it on your face. Cool, quiet, real. For a second, it carries the scent of wet earth and lavender from the courtyard garden. You close your eyes, breathing it in, trying to hold on to it before it's replaced by roasted lamb. And whatever happened to that goat cheese custard? The dog barks. Once. Then curls into a perfect loaf and resumes snoring. You open your eyes. Lucius is asleep now, wine cup in hand, mouth slightly open in a half snore. Someone has tucked a napkin gently under his chin, possibly out of respect, possibly as a prank. Another guest mumbles something about going home. No one answers. It's not clear where home is anymore. The triclinium is home now. The couches are your family. The sauces are your truth. Historians still debate whether Roman dinners ended with formal dismissals, or just slowly dissolved into sleep. Tonight, it's definitely the latter. Your limbs feel soft. Your thoughts blur. Someone whispers, "Let's play that game where we pretend to be senators voting on which wine was best." There are murmurs of approval. A few half-hearted eyesies. One guy raises a plum like it's a gavel. "I vote for the sweet one that tasted like cinnamon dreams." "I vote for the one that made me forget who I was," says another. A sleepy chuckle ripples through the room. The lights are dimmer now. Not because someone turned them down, but because the oil lamps are quietly running out. Their flicker has slowed as if even the fire needs a nap. Your eyes droop. You hear the last of the conversation stretch into mumbling fragments. "So then I told the senator, if you really believe in fate, you shouldn't have left the octopus. I swear the flamingo looked at me like it knew. Figs are just grapes with goals." You drift, and then Lucius, somehow reanimated by his own snore, raises his head and mutters, "Final course. Fig cake. Final toast." His voice is hoarse, barely audible. Yet like an incantation, it stirs everyone just enough to lift their cups one last time. Even the parrot whispers something that vaguely sounds like cheers. You raise your goblet. No words, just a look, a nod, a sip. The room exhales. You have survived the Roman dinner party, just barely. You're no longer certain if you're awake or dreaming, but the fig cake is real. It's placed gently before you, on a small golden plate. Simple, almost humble, compared to the 12 courses that preceded it. A round, dense slice, with a deep caramel hue, its surface glistening under the low flicker of the dying oil lamps. A single candied fig rests on top like a crown. You stare at it for a long time. You're not hungry. You're not even functioning. And yet, you lift your fork. When did you get a fork? And take a bite. Soft, sweet, sticky. The cake crumbles slowly in your mouth, like it's been waiting for centuries just to fall apart for you. The fig melts into honey and spice, and suddenly, you are floating again, drifting on a tide of sugar and cinnamon, grounded by nothing except the warm ache in your belly and the weight of a toga that feels 2 sizes tighter than when the evening began. All around you, the other guests are doing the same. Silent, reverent. There are no more jokes, no more chants, just the sound of contented chewing and the occasional quiet murmur, By the gods. Is this real? Lucius, somehow awake again, but with one eye still closed, lifts his fig cake slice like a sacred relic. To sweetness, he says softly, voice dry. To sweetness, the room replies almost in unison. The parrot rustles. Too sweet, it mumbles one last time, then goes blissfully quiet. There's no more wine now. The amphorae are drained. The cups sit tilted and still. The sauce bowls have dried into abstract artworks. Crumbs scatter like tiny ruins. The couches have become cocoons, each guest curled up in a private haze of satisfaction and survivorship. You slowly place your fork down. A breeze drifts through the open ceiling again this time, cooler, carrying the scent of night-blooming jasmine and old smoke. It brushes across your skin like a sigh. A servant brings a small basin of warm water with rose petals. You barely lift your hands as they're rinsed dried with linen. You nod faintly. Your soul says thank you, even if your body can't manage the words. You glance across the room one last time. Lucius is reclined fig cake in one hand, the other resting on his stomach like a man who just won a war against reason. The harpist, who has long since stopped playing, leans against the wall, plucking at a single string as if trying to remember what music felt like before the aspic. One guest has curled up in their couch entirely, toga pulled over their head. Another has simply slumped forward, cheek on the table, snoring gently into a bowl of forgotten nuts. You watch as a servant snuffs out a lamp, then another. Darkness begins to bloom at the edges of the room. No one moves. You lie back, pressing your head against the cushioned fingers, still slightly sticky lips, faintly sweet. You are full, not just in the stomach, but in that strange, ancient way, full of noise, laughter, salt poetry, absurdity, full of Rome. And just before your eyes close, you hear someone whisper, "We should do this again next week." Someone else groans. You smile. You've lived through it. A Roman dinner party with far too many courses. And now, as the fig cake fades from your tongue, and the night wraps itself around you, like a linen shroud, you feel everything begin to soften. The laughter dims into memory. The sauces fade into stillness, and the wine settles into your bones like a gentle hum. The couches no longer creak beneath shifting guests. They simply hold what's left of the evening half-finished sentences, smudged fingerprints on golden plates, and dreams steeped in honey. The last oil lamp flickers just once. Its glow sways, then steadies, then slowly surrenders. Outside, the sky stretches into deep indigo stars, watching with timeless patience. The breeze moves quietly now, brushing your face, rustling the edge of a curtain, gently nudging you toward sleep. You exhale, long and slow. Everything is slower now. The goose is gone. The parrot sleeps. Lucius, your host, is somewhere in a sweet and snoring heap of cushions and pride. The guests who still remain are draped in sleep mouths, parted slightly, their breathing even, and you are still. You are quiet. You are full in every way. Let your limbs go soft. Let your breath ease deeper. The night no longer asks anything of you. There are no more courses, no more cups to raise, no more odd animals to identify. Just this moment. Just the steady hush of sleep. You've survived ancient Rome. You've laughed, feasted, reclined, and endured, and now, gently, finally, let go.